Welcome to Ask the Building Expert webinar series, and we're happy that you guys are attending. And by the way, the title is Ask the Building Expert, so if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. We have Martin Pea in the back-end IT, making sure everything runs smoothly and I don't fall asleep. So, wanted to let you guys know that this is a continuing webinar series. We've done a whole bunch already, and we have some interesting ones for the future, such as railing failure issues, hurricane ties, roofing, premises liability, avoid the lawsuits, and a whole lot more. It's really fun for me because in each topic, I get to use the show and tell. I want to put photos up of interesting situations or interesting scenarios that I've encountered where people can see corroded piping, corroded railing, concrete cracking, and all that. So a lot of photos that I would present in our webinars are actually photos that I took on a job site um, over my 40 years of experience. So um, let's continue on. So the series of webinars actually are made free to help building owners, condo associations, property managers, board members, and anybody who's interested in the topics. It could even include homeowners as well and commercial property owners. Our topic today is air conditioning, fresh air facts. And you may be wondering, why fresh air facts? Well, fresh air facts, fresh air should be coming from air conditioning. So on this webinar, I'm not going to give you a bunch of hot air. I'm going to be talking about fresh air and new air. So what is air conditioning and what kind of types of air conditioning are we talking about? So there's actually three main types of HVAC systems, and HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Now, if you're in Hawaii, you don't really use heating too much, but on the mainland and other parts of the world, there's a system where it's a combination heating and air conditioning. So in the winter, you use the heating function, and during the summer, you want cold air, so you use the air conditioning function. And it's basically one system that does both. So let's talk about the different types of air conditioning. The most common type and the cheapest type is a window wall AC. You know, that little box that people put in their windows. And if you look at the image on the left, that's what it looks like. It's a little box, and um, it fits in a wall or window, and it gives you cold air. Now, the thing about these units is that it works, and they don't last too long. They get corroded, and the BTUs aren't as great. So you could probably get these box types, maybe up to 15,000 BTUs, and that's it. And that's all it can do. Uh, as opposed to a central air system where you could cool an entire office building. And then the other type is a split system. And the reason they call a split is it's two different components. There's one component that's inside the room, and the compressor component is outside the room. So the fan coil unit is called the indoor component, and the compressor, which is located outside, is called the outdoor or outside exterior component. And basically, these are the three main types. Now, when you're talking about a huge office building or condominium or shopping center, they don't use a window wall. Um, they don't really use a split system. It's basically a huge central air conditioning system. And it looks like this. And it's called a commercial cooling tower. And when you go on a roof of a high-rise building or a shopping center, uh, you probably don't see these because you don't go on a roof like I do. But some of these are very huge. And can you imagine a 40-story office building or a high-rise building, and how are you going to get this equipment uh, off of the roof to replace it? Guess what? You have to use a helicopter. And it's a whole different aspect. So let's hope these things don't break down as much so we don't have to use a helicopter to replace them. So how do air conditioners work? Well, the basic premise of how an air conditioner works is the air conditioner is actually a part of a central heating and cooling system. So what happens is the air conditioner draws heat energy out of the house or a room and transfers it to the outside air. And then at the same time, it replaces the air with cooler air. And basically, in a nutshell, that's how it works. Now, it could get really complicated and technical when there's all these different components, such as air handler, blower, expansion valve, compressor, the coils, a fan, condenser, exhaust ducting, and so forth. But this is not a webinar on technicalities. And basically, I wanted to explain, uh, in a simple format, how an air conditioner works. The simplest format would be this image where it's just a fan. So that's a manual air conditioner, right? And in the old days, they didn't have the technology like they do today. And how did they cool themselves? They invented a fan and they fan themselves. But what happens is the fan is only moving around hot air. But because the air movement, you do a lot of fanning, you feel cooler, right? And that's the idea. So let's talk about air quality or indoor air quality issues. Now, believe it or not, there's a whole bunch of studies on IAQ, which stands for indoor air quality, and whatever state you're in, your state health department is actually in charge of indoor air quality issues. On a national level, guess what? It's the Environmental Protection Agency, and CDC is also involved in indoor air quality issues. Now, you heard of CDC before because their name always comes up because of the COVID pandemic. Okay. The question is, how is the air quality in your home or office? And you may say, well, it's pretty good because I get cold air. Okay, but cold air is not the entirety of the air quality issue. You have to take into consideration what components are actually in the air and not just having cold air. So another agency that actually governs or comments about indoor air quality issues is a World Health Organization, because this is not just a uh, local issue or even a national issue. The indoor air quality is an international issue. And the comment is indoor air can be up to 5 times more contaminated than outdoor air. Can you believe that? So the indoor air, which people are inside most of the time, can be 5 times more contaminated than outdoor air. Now, why? Well, you could have contaminants in the house already or in the building, and what happens is it gets recycled and it starts blowing around uh, inside. So you already have, say, dust inside the house or in the office, and the air conditioner would would clean that, filter it out, but not every particles will get filtered and cleaned. So basically, you still have small, minute particulates or small particles where you can't see blowing around in the air, and you're breathing that stuff. So it's basically bad air. Indoor air quality is basically clean air. And what do you do to make sure that the air is clean? What steps can you take? Of course, air conditioning is a big factor because the air conditioner and the air conditioning system is filtering the air and cleaning the air out, or we hope so. The Environmental Protection Agency, as I mentioned, also governs indoor air quality issues. And the standard is protect indoor air quality in buildings. And whether it's a house that you live in, a shopping center that you shop, or an office building where you work, the indoor air quality situation is always there and always something to be aware of. Now, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has ranked indoor air quality among the top 5 environmental dangers or hazards facing the general public. Well, why is that? Well, it's because the air that's coming out from the air conditioning system into the buildings may not be that clean. And so we're talking about any kind of building where it's enclosed and you don't have fresh air coming in and you're using the air conditioning system. So it could be shopping centers, could be a church, a golf course building, industrial warehouse, or any type of building that uses air conditioning. Before I talk about liability and lawsuits, I want to mention some fresh air facts. So there's 6 helpful tips to be aware of when you're dealing with air conditioning. Okay? One of them is limit your time in buildings. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean if I work in an office, I can tell my boss I'm only going to work half day every day because of the air? No, what that means is um, try not to stay inside buildings for long periods of time. And the air that's outside is actually supposedly cleaner than the air inside. And as we go through this webinar, I'll explain why. Okay, the other thing is physically renewing sources of contamination. And that's the air conditioning system. Cleaning surfaces. So in other words, if somebody doesn't dust surfaces, let's talk about an office building. If people don't go in there and clean and mop the floors, vacuum the carpets, wipe down the desks, credenzas, and whatever's there, what happens is dust starts building up, and then it gets moved around, and eventually it gets into the air conditioning system, and then it cycles around. So not every filter is going to work properly, because guess what? Some of the filters may already be dirty and they're maxed out. So any kind of dust or germs that go through the filter, it's supposed to stop. It doesn't stop, it goes through, and then it cycles back into the office space. Okay, so that could be a problem. So make sure clean the surfaces, improve ventilation. What that means is make sure the vents are working properly, make sure that um, the whole system is cycling. And what that, I mean, it's on a lot, and especially with COVID, The EPA and the World Health Organization is telling these office buildings, shopping center owners to cycle the air conditioning, turn it on maximum. And although it takes a lot of energy, that's the way you're going to get the air cleaner. Don't put it on low and thinking that you're saving energy, because the low cycle is not going to work properly, especially during the COVID time. The other thing is filtering the air and cleaning the air. So the air conditioning system filters the bad air and it also cleans it. Okay, so um, those are the 6 helpful tips for air conditioning. Now let's talk about liability and lawsuits. And why am I explaining this? Because this has to do with bad air. Have you ever gone to a store, a shopping center, a restaurant, or maybe even a doctor's office, dentist's office, and looked up at the ceiling? Now, people normally don't look up when they're walking around, but maybe the next time you go to a store or visit a doctor's office, look up at the ceiling and look at the vents. And those are the air conditioning vents. And if you see the vent itself stained with dark stain or what looks like dust, like it's not dusted or clean, and the ceiling area, it could be ceiling tiles or acoustic spray or whatever the ceiling material is. And normally the ceilings are painted white or a lighter color. So if it gets dusty or dirty, it's easier to see. So if you look and you see these stains, that's not a very good sign, right? That means that somebody didn't clean either the air conditioner, the vent, or the ductwork, or even the ceiling. Or you look up and you see not black stains, you see these brown circular type stains. That's actually from water. And the ductwork, or there's condensation building up, and now water starts dripping on the ceiling. And if you see um, dark stains where it's not just a stain, it's like something's growing on the ceiling and it looks like moss or something, that could be mold. And it's no fun to see that. Now, I've actually gone into stores that have a prescription department. So they're selling health products and prescription drugs and all that. Looked up at the ceiling and saw how bad the vents were and the ceiling was stained. So, if I'm not feeling too good and I walk in, that thing is going to make me sicker, maybe. Or what's worse is you go in a doctor's office or a hospital and you look up and you see these dark stains on the air conditioning vents or the ceiling. That doesn't give you a good sense of security, right? You're like, this hospital, people are supposed to be uh, treated when they're sick, but look at this condition. They might even get sicker going to this hospital. Okay, so just a heads up, when you're walking around, kind of look up. If you're in an office building and you see these, then notify somebody and say, yeah, I think we have a problem with our air conditioning system. Or even if the filter has been changed, look at the condition of the ceiling and the vents. I mean, it's kind of scary. But I got some more scary photos to show you. Take a look at these photos. You know what they are? They're on the inside of an air conditioning vent. So how do you, if you have an office building and you have to cool each individual office space, how do you get the cold air to go into each individual room? You have to have these vents, and um, it's basically square or rectangle metal ductwork, and the carries the cold air into these different spaces. So if you have a big house you're living in and it has a central air system, it has these ductworks also, and it may be located in the attic and in the ceiling areas. So if you look on at the photo on the left, that's a lot of dust and particles and everything built up. And guess what? When the question is, when when did the people last clean this? It doesn't look like they cleaned it at all. So if it gets to the point where the ductwork is so bad and it can't be cleaned, guess what? It has to be replaced. But in this situation, if they keep cleaning it, it should be nice and clean on the inside. The majority of the people, nobody looks on the inside of an air conditioning duct. So you don't really know what the condition is. When you call the air conditioning mechanic to come in, they're going to open up the ceiling. They're going to get into the ductwork, and then they're going to see this, and then they're going to say, I think we're going to call somebody else. Okay. So it's pretty bad. If you look at the photo on the right, it doesn't look that good too, right? And guess what? This is mold building up in the ductwork. So let's say at the end of this duct, you have a air conditioning vent, and your cold air is blowing through the duct and coming out into your office space, and you're breathing this stuff where you got particles of mold and all of that blowing around in the air, and you're breathing it 8 hours a day or however many hours you're working in that office space. So you might say, well, good thing I'm working at home. I don't have to breathe this stuff. But what happens when you go back to work? Okay, so these are things that you cannot see, but they're there. Okay, now what happens if there's a coronavirus that ends up going into the air conditioning system and then coming out in the air? Is that possible? I think it's entirely possible, because the CDC is now saying that the virus is not spread through necessarily contact, like a human contacting an object, like if there's a virus on a door handle, they're going to touch it and then all of a sudden they're going to get infected. That they say that that's highly unlikely. What's more likely is the airborne uh, virus is in the air, and then people are breathing that, or they're too close to somebody that's infected, and now they're breathing the particulates in the air. It's called aerosols. It's small, like water droplets. Okay, so the question is, do you think there's actually liability and lawsuits if people start getting sick from mold, or they get allergic conditions and they go to work in an enclosed space and they start getting sick? Do you think that they can sue their the building, the management company, if they didn't maintain the air conditioning? The answer is yes, because anybody can sue anybody for anything. But will they would they be able to prevail if they can prove that they got sick from the air conditioning? Yeah, that's a lawsuit already. Now, how do we avoid these problems? Okay, one way is to, if you're a building manager, property manager, resident manager, condo board member, or in charge of managing any kind of building, the first thing you do is you have to make sure that you have a maintenance program in place. And this is just best practice methods. Okay. You don't just call an air conditioner mechanic if the air conditioner is not working. You have to put that piece of mechanical equipment on a maintenance schedule. And then you may ask, well, what is a maintenance schedule? Okay, very easy. A maintenance schedule is How do you determine how many times somebody has to come and inspect the system and clean it? Well, you go and look at the owner's manual. If you don't have one, because some manuals may be lost, or the air conditioning system is 20 years old and the manual fell apart, so it got thrown away. Um, all you do is find out what the brand is and contact the manufacturer, and you can get the manual from them. And you read the manual, because the manual is the Bible for maintenance. It's going to say your filter's got to be changed and inspected every 6 months. Your motor has to be inspected and lubricated, components every year, whatever. That'll dictate. So you don't have to guess or make up whenever you're going to call the air conditioning mechanic. It's right there. It's almost like when you buy a car, there's an owner's manual, and you just got to read it and follow what it says. Now, what happens if you don't follow the instructions? So let's say it says you have to inspect the system and clean the filters every 6 months. What happens if you forget or don't do it? Well, guess what? You call the guy in, he's going to look at it and go, whoa, when was the last time you changed this filter, or you had this parts lubricated? Oh, I don't know. I'm new, and we don't have any records. Oh, well, I can tell you that it hasn't been changed for 2 years. And then what happens is, because of that, some of the parts break down, then you go, okay, go fix it, because we have a 5-year warranty. And then that guy's going to say, because you didn't follow the maintenance procedures, your warranty is voided. And then what? Now you're going to have to spend even more money. So that's just some tips on saving money and maintaining your air conditioning system. So best practices are always good. So make sure that you follow the rules. Now, if you look at the image on the left, I took that in the newer part of Kaka'ako. I looked up in the ceiling, and this is not a high-rise building now. This is connected to a parking deck, so it may be 5 stories high, but the ceiling is very high. And if you look at that round circular thing, that's actually a vent where cold air comes out. And you look at those long rectangle things, that's the ductwork. Okay. Now, I found it interesting that the ceiling was so high and it's not dropped, that now they're air conditioning this whole space, which they don't really need to. So I'm thinking that they're kind of wasting energy by doing that, but I'm not sure what their reasoning for that is. But I find it kind of awkward, because normally if you have high ceilings, you drop the ceiling down, so you only air condition the lower part. So the upper part, where it could be the exact same square footage of the lower section, is not air conditioned at all. So you're saving like half the energy, basically. Because what happens is, when you air condition all this space above, say, 10 feet or 12 feet, there's no humans there. So you're just air conditioning that space for nothing, basically. Although the piping is probably happy because they're not getting hot. Okay, let's talk about the COVID-19 alert. So you got these organizations, like I mentioned before, the World Health Organization, the CDC, and we're in Hawaii, Hawaii State Department of Health. But if you're on the webinar and you're from different states across the United States, or you're in different countries, wherever around the world, you go to your local jurisdiction, and there's a local Department of Health. And I'm not sure, what it's called in France or Italy, but there are departments, and it could be jurisdictional, it could be a city, a county, or something like that. But there is a government authority that governs air conditioning, ventilation, and indoor air quality. So you just have to go look it up and try to find it. In Hawaii, that's the Hawaii State Department of Health, and there's a separate branch called the Indoor Air Quality Branch, believe it or not. Not many people are aware that the indoor quality issue is prevalent, but if you heard of the term sick building syndrome, that's related to the indoor quality air situation, because in the past people were getting sick because of the air that they would breathe, whether it was mold in the air or allergens or other factors that governs the indoor air quality. The government is involved. COVID-19 best practices. Okay, what are they? Well, make sure you have proper ventilation, increase outdoor air. So if you live in a house and you have windows and you don't have any air conditioning, all you do is open your windows, and if it's a good trade wind day, you're actually um, taking part in the proper ventilation and you're increasing the outdoor air, because anytime you have outdoor air coming in and hopefully the air is clean, uh, that actually is a good practice. But if you don't, your house doesn't, a building doesn't have um, windows where you can open it, and a lot of these new high-rise buildings today, condo buildings, office buildings, there's no windows where you can open. It's just all enclosed. So you have to depend on the air conditioner. So what do you do then? Well, make sure the air conditioning works. And as I mentioned before, the high air filtration. What you do is you have to turn that thing on and cycle it out. Now, what office buildings do is when people go home after work, they shut the air conditioning system down. And you don't want to do that. You want to have it on at least low so the air can constantly be filtered, especially because of the COVID-19 situation. And make sure you have functional exhaust fans. And what I'm talking about is you have these common area restrooms where you have to have the air inside the restroom venting out somewhere to the outside. Sometimes these exhaust fans don't work, or you look at them and there's all this dust and grime on it. Sometimes I go to restaurants, and in the restroom, you can tell the exhaust fan doesn't work, because how could it? It got so much dust and stuff on it. There's no way it's even halfway functional. If you're in a condo and there's common area restrooms, like by a pool building, and it's enclosed and you don't have windows that you could open, you got to make sure the exhaust fans are working. If you're in a parking deck and it's enclosed or it's in a basement, make sure that those exhaust fans work too, because it's what it is. It's just taking the carbon monoxide and bad air out of the parking area and blowing it out. The parking without those fans, and there's a lot of cars going in and out, you could be breathing bad air inside a parking deck. So that's not good. So if you take these under consideration, it'll be a better situation. And then basically, I covered things, but wanted to also mention that if you have these little house plants that you can use, and um, there may be some plants that are better for indoor and that cycles the air and cleans the air, and it's available online, and you can buy those and keep it in your house or keep it in your office space, and that would help with the situation. So right now, I want to see if there's any Q&A, and I'll ask Martin if he has anybody ask any questions.
Hey, hi, Lance. Yeah, we had a few questions in the chat. that I'm sure our listeners and the viewers want to get answered here. So here's the first one. I'm buying an old house, and the home inspector said that the newly installed AC split system does not have enough power due to the 70 amp main electrical. Is that true?
What was the number of amps?
It said 70 amp.
Oh, okay, thanks. Older homes, if you go really old houses, the older you go, the lesser the amp. So the older houses had like 50 amp main, and then later on, there was some where they used 70 or 90 or 95 amps. Anyway, today's standard is at least 100 amps. So I think the situation that this guy's talking about is he must live in an older house, probably built like in the 50s, and your main electrical was 70 amps. That at the time that was enough to power the whole house. It was not enough power to even add in a window air conditioning system. So apparently, this person had installed, or the homeowner installed a split system air conditioning system, and the inspector looked at it and said there was not enough power. So how are they getting their power? They got their power because they tapped into the 70 amp main, and they're getting their power to the AC from that. Now, I'm glad this question came up, because I want to explain that if you're installing a split system for air conditioning, okay, it requires a permit, okay, and a building permit, and it requires the use of a licensed air conditioning contractor and the use of a licensed electrical contractor. Now, why do you need two? Why can't the air conditioning contractor do the electrical? Well, the air conditioning contractor only does air conditioning. He's not an electrician. Although he may know how to hook it up, he has to have the right license. So the problem here is the homeowner installed the split system. They did not get a permit. They used the air conditioning contractor, and I don't know if that guy was licensed or even where the electrician was licensed, but they should not have tapped into the main. That actually is an overload situation that could cause a fire hazard. So I'm glad that question was brought up, because that's a bad situation. Now, the question you may ask is, well, what do I do? Well, if you're a buyer buying the property, you go back to the seller and say, this has to be fixed. And then, it's up for negotiation. So thanks. That's an interesting question. Do we have any others?
Yes, Lance. There's a couple more. The next question is, what is the ideal air temperature for an office building?
Okay, it depends where you come from. If you came from Alaska, it may be 50 degrees. Actually, all the studies show that the ideal temperature, believe it or not, was 71.6. Okay, so the ideal temperature for inside office building is 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, is that too cold or too hot? Not sure, but everybody's body is different, and they're going to react to different temperatures. So I would say, and I used to tell people that the normal range or the normal temperature that's acceptable is 72 degrees. But then when I did more research, it's 71.6. Wow, was I close? I think so. So, but even at that temperature, if you still feel, not sufficiently cool, then maybe the air should be a little colder. If you feel that it's too cold, then crank the thermostat up a few degrees and then try it out and see. Because sometimes, like when I travel and go to hotels and there's a temperature thermostat and you look, sometimes that's not exact. So I set it for 72, and then I know that it's probably 74 or 75. So it's not exact. So then I got to make it 68, and then I feel that it's probably 72. So it's just, not every gauge is exact. So just kind of, trial and error kind of thing. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Lance, there's a couple more here from our chat. The next one is, how often do I need someone to clean my AC unit?
The person didn't say. I guess a person is a homeowner as opposed to a property manager. So let's say, well, my answer is actually applies to both. So the question, how often should the filter be changed? Well, it depends on what the manufacturer says. It's not up to me, but although if you ask me the question without telling me what the manufacturer said, I would say uh, at least every 6 months, maybe a year, depends how often you use the AC. Now in Hawaii, people may not use the air conditioner all year. They only use it during 4 months out of the year during hot summer months, let's say. So you're not running the air conditioner 24/7 or 12 months out of the year. Therefore, your filter is still good. So if it says change it every six months, you may not need to, but at least call the air conditioning contractor to come and take a look at it. If he goes, oh, you don't need to change the filter, it's still good. Okay, fine. Check everything else, make sure it's running. Or I know some people who they may have people in their house that have allergies, and they're like, I don't care if the filter looks clean, just change it anyway, because I want to make sure that we have optimum performance on the whole system. So basically, my advice is go back to the manufacturer and look and see. If you can't find the book or the manual, just call up the company, uh, any air conditioning. Now, if it's a certain brand and you want to call up somebody that services that brand and then ask them, but some air conditioning companies, they service multiple brands, so they would know offhand, and they can guide you in the right direction. So that's the answer. Any other questions?
Yes, Lance, there's one more, a little bit longer one, and then I actually had a question for you. But let me get this one from our participant here. It says, I just went back to work after working at home for a year due to COVID. The room temperature is so cold that I have to wear a sweater all day. It was never this cold before. What can I do?
I would tell the boss I have to go home because it's too cold. But um, here's some suggestions. You have to let your supervisor know, and it depends on who's controlling their air conditioning system. Now, I've seen some older office buildings where you have different companies on the same floor, and the air conditioning system is only controlled by by that floor. They don't have it separated into each office spaces. That's a problem. I've seen others where you have your own air conditioner, but there's no balancing. So you have one office where they're freezing, and in another office space they're hot because the system is not balanced correctly. So I think that sounds like you need to have a uh, air conditioning mechanic come in, take a look at the system and fix it. Maybe the balancer isn't working properly or the thermostat's broken or something like that. In other words, every single person that works in the office space should have the same temperature. There should not be one office space freezing and another one too hot. So, and that's a kind of common situation. I've actually inspected brand new office buildings where it was recently constructed, and we had to go floor by floor to do inspections. And man, the air conditioners was not balanced at all. You had some office areas where it was like ice cold. You don't even need a freezer. You could just bring food there and leave it there. That's how cold it was. And then in another space, we cranked the thermostat, down to like 65 degrees, and it was still reading like 72. So there was something wrong with that. The other thing to for consideration is that if your office, your personal office space where you're sitting is facing west and you get more sun. Okay, so what happens is the air conditioner has to work better for that space because the sun is hitting the building, going through the glass, and even if you have thick glass, okay, because of the heat from the sun, it's going to drop the inside temperature of that room. And a lot of office buildings, you have like really nice views of the ocean and the mountain, and you don't want to put heavy drapes or whatever to cover the view, right? So that's just some kind of adjustment that needs to be made. The newer buildings today, they have zones and they can control specific zones. So if let's say you have a office space that's divided into, five separate offices, and then even smaller offices, and then a big area, open area. The way that it's designed is for each office space, you have a separate zone where you can control your own air conditioning. If you close the door, you have your own environment there. The guy next to you, he closes his door, he has control of his own air conditioning. He can't control your space. But then the people who work in the general area that are in all these cubicles, um, that's all controlled by one control. So uh, make sure that area is properly balanced so everybody feels comfortable. The main thing is there is personal space and you have to feel comfortable. There's no reason why you should be hot at work or too cold at work, and you shouldn't have to bring a sweater and wear it all day where the guy down the hall is wearing a t-shirt kind of thing. Now I know that there's government buildings that are like that because I get calls from people saying, I work at the city building and I have to wear a sweater all the time, but then down the hall, um, it's not as cold. Okay, so they're just dealing with the old system. So hopefully that answered the question. Do we have any other last minute questions before we sign off?
Yeah, Lance, I just get one quick
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot
question.
about yours.
Yeah, just that's all. And this is regard your comment about the air quality, inside is not as good as outside. Yeah, actually, personally, I'm a proponent of natural air and all that kind of stuff. So I'd rather not even use air conditioning. So I just wanted to kind of get your view on Hawaii air quality in general. I'm presuming we're talking about the outside air. And the other thing is, for me, the best solution to keep the house cool is just natural air, and just I just use a all house exhaust fan to kind of exhaust out, and pull the air through. So I guess my question is, how do you see our air quality, outdoor air, compared to others? Like my son is in LA, and we know how bad it is over there. those kind of things. And then, alternatives for guys like me who don't really like air conditioning.
Well, that's a good question. Let me start off by saying Hawaii's air is fairly clean. If you look at LA and other cities, I mean, it's very polluted. And but because of COVID and people weren't going to work as much and factories kind of shut down and stuff, the LA air actually got better. And it's going to go back and get worse again. But getting back to your question, Hawaii's air is fairly clean. And the reason why is because Hawaii has trade winds. And every time you have winds that are blowing, it circulates the air. So the trade winds act as like a natural air conditioning, basically. It doesn't filter the air, but it mixes air that's maybe not so good with better air. And so the trade winds normally comes from the ocean, hits the mountain, and bounces back, and then goes the other way. So normally that's how it functions. So you're right. The outside air in Hawaii is better for the most part than air that's inside a house or a building. So it's good. Open the windows and let the air go through. Now, that's on a good situation. If you have a situation where your house or your neighbor, they're doing yard work, weed eating, and cutting trees and all that, then what happens is the air gets bad because now you got all this dust and dirt going around in the air. So you would close your windows. Now, the only other thing that I wanted to bring up is even if you're in Hawaii, but you live next to an industrial area, a factory, and they got these smokestacks or exhaust things coming out, then the air may not be that good. And I know I inspected a storage facility in Waipahu, and right next door to it was a sausage factory. And so, they make sausages. So the air around the building smells good, but it's actually kind of, polluted, I think. And then the other thing is, if you live on the Big Island and the volcano erupts, now you have the fog, and the fog is actually hazardous to your health. It's poisonous. There's toxins in that fog that make it difficult to breathe, and people who have health problems shouldn't be breathing that stuff. It's like you're sitting next to a guy who's chain smoking and blowing the smoke in your direction. So it could be pretty bad, but for the most part, the air in Hawaii is fairly clean. Similarly, the water in Hawaii is fairly clean. And so, I'm glad we live in Hawaii rather than LA, because you're outside. And for my line of work, I'm actually outside most of the time. I enjoy being outside, so I don't necessarily have a indoor air quality issue because I'm not inside buildings a lot. But I could tell by when I do go into a building and my eyes start burning and I have, my throat starts getting scratchy, and I can just feel that the air isn't that good. So I could be like a dog, a human dog maybe. But normally, even mold situations, I go into a place and all of a sudden my eyes start watering and all that, and I tell the people, "You got mold here," and they go, "Where? I don't see it." I said, "Well, hire this company. Let's bring in this company to test it." And sure enough, they find mold somewhere. So hopefully I answered your question. Did I?
Yes, you did very well. Thank you. But you're right. Luckily, we live Hawaii. Clean air, clean water. I appreciate the ocean breeze and the mountain waters. So
Yeah, maybe we can use you for marketing to tourists, right? We need more tourists coming to Hawaii. But anyway, thank you everybody for attending, and we really appreciate you, you guys from all over the United States and even some parts of the world. It's amazing with the power of the internet, how the word gets out about this webinar. And I'd like to also say that if you have other questions or topics that you want covered, shoot us an email or give us a call. We'll be happy to correspond with you and take your topic under consideration. We've been doing like 2 webinars a month. So basically at the end of the year, we've given 24 and then we got another 24 scheduled, but we're always happy to look at other topics of interest that people would be interested in. And, we'll be happy to consider that for an upcoming webinar. And so with that, let's say, hope to see you at the next webinar. Go to our website, askbuildingexpert.now.site, and look over the list of webinars. If you see an interesting topic, please sign up. Also, if you feel that you're interested in the webinar, but you can't make it because you have to work or you have another commitment, please sign up anyway, because when you do that, you're going to be on the list, and then we'll email you the replay video so you can still watch it whenever you can. So how about that? And plus that, remember, our webinars are free right now. We don't know when we're going to start charging, but take advantage of it. And once again, we'll hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you.